all I do is teach AI and think about it and read about it. And I feel overwhelmed sometimes because there's such a deluge of content out there now. If you are the kind of person who's plugging numbers into a spreadsheet, or you're the kind of person that sits back and waits for somebody to tell you what to do, like an order taker, you won't have a job.
Welcome to Homegrown CEO, the podcast for entrepreneurs, leaders, and business builders seeking actionable insights to grow their ventures and themselves. I'm your host, Matt Colborn, and today's episode might just be the most topical and relevant conversation we've released so far. How to use AI with intention for long-term success. This is a topic I'm particularly interested in, having experimented with AI's place in my own business for a number of years. But I'm not the exception. Everyone is having to rethink, reassess, and possibly even restructure amidst this AI revolution. And today's guest is an expert on how to do it right. Founder of AI agency A25, Tahnee Perry is a leading consultant when it comes to helping workplaces integrate AI successfully and effectively. Having learned and adopted AI models from its earliest years, in this episode, she's about to give you honest, realistic advice on how to roll it out across your teams and how to future-proof your own skills in this new, exciting landscape. Let's welcome Tahnee to the podcast. There's a lot of noise about how to use AI, but one of the challenges with that is that not a lot of that noise is helping people understand how to do it really well. So what does that actually mean, being intentional when we think about our use of AI?
Yeah, I teach a framework that I call driver versus passenger, and I it's really easy to be a passenger, to just take a sit back, lean back, and let AI do everything for you, and you get very generic, maybe good enough results out of that. But I always encourage people to be a driver, an active participant in their collaboration with artificial intelligence. And being a driver means being very intentional about when you use it, when you do not use it, applying your own critical thinking, applying some of your judgment, and then never taking the result that you get at face value. You always have to put some of yourself back into that output. I hear people say all the time, well, ChatGPT said, or Claude told me to do this. And I think, oh gosh, don't do that, because what you're doing is you're basically outsourcing your thinking to an AI model that doesn't know anything really about you. What you're better off doing is having a collaboration with your AI tool and then making the decision for yourself. And to me, that is being a driver.
So I've got a few passenger princesses in my household, and honestly, probably nothing better than being driven around or letting the feel of a nice warm bath wash over you. But if you've become a bit of a passenger princess with AI, what are some of the things that you can start to do differently? Like, what should I try and do differently?
You have to be an active participant. I think of, like watching a movie, really lovely, easy. You sit back, that's great.
Mm.
Reading a book is a much more, they call it like a high intensity task. So think about working with AI as if you were reading a book, and you have to really put your brain to work. And you have to be intentional about that. It's not something that happens naturally. So I think a really good trick or a good practice to add in is to, before you immediately jump into an AI tool like ChatGPT, is to spend a minute thinking about what you're trying to do, what
Mm.
your outcome is, what the process might look like, what
Mm.
is a good result. Think about that first and then move into working with the AI. And I guarantee you it'll put your brain in gear, but it'll also give you a lot more clarity about what you're getting out on the other end.
And so by being too much of a passenger, is that sort of falling into an over-reliance on the AI doing the work for you?
Yeah, in some cases, I think of being a passenger as more about the way that you use AI. You've probably seen these memes
Mm.
online, or you may have even been the recipient of something where somebody just cut and paste it
Yeah.
from ChatGPT. Someone sent me an email once, and then down the bottom there was the line, "Would you like me to rewrite this in a more formal tone?" So I knew that's a dead giveaway. That someone literally, they didn't even read the full response. They just cut and paste it. And to me, that's a sure sign that you're a passenger. So really, I encourage you not to do that.
So, what are some of the more unique or useful things that you found that AI can do for people that they may not have thought about using it for?
For me, I mean, I use AI all day, every day, and I couldn't live without it. If there was an outage on Claude a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know what to do with myself," because everything I do is really integrated. But where I get the most value is having AI operate as a thought leader for
Mm,
me and more of like a strategic guide. AI is really good at assuming a point of view or embodying a certain type of person. So for me, what I'll do is I'll put together a strategic plan, or I'm a marketer by trade, so
mm,
I'll create a campaign and I will take that creation and I will drop it into ChatGPT and I'll say, act as my board of directors or act as my CEO, or if it's a campaign, act as my target audience and give me feedback. What's good? What's bad? What might you change? And I think of that as like pressure testing my ideas. And I don't think enough people do that. And it's really helpful because it's like having a mentor
mm.
that you have access to 24/7. Instead of having to bother a colleague or maybe somebody in your company, you can go to AI first and get some of that initial feedback.
But the other side of that is that you can just keep asking AI until it eventually agrees with your outrageous thoughts and it's quite agreeable to what you wanted to do anyway.
That is true. And you have to know when to cut it off. I feel like if you get the sense that you're going down a rabbit hole and it's just giving you the same answer or a same variation of an answer, you have to be a driver. You have to know when it's doing that and you have to be like, "Okay, I've pushed this tool or this platform as far as I can go, and now I need to stop and I need to take this back and do the rest myself."
And do you think that there's a bit of a difference between, say, solar operators or very small business operators where there's not much of a team and they're really using it individually versus what are some of the challenges that then larger teams or companies have when trying to bring an AI culture into their business?
If you're a bigger company, I think you need to be a little more intentional and you need to have a more structured approach to the rollout. I've heard stories about large companies where they haven't handled this very well. They just say,
Mm,
"Here you go, here's a tool. Go and make this happen and be more productive and effective and magical in your day-to-day." And they haven't thought through any of the implications. They haven't done any change management. And what happens is you get a lot of
mm.
resistance. And then as a team leader or a manager, you have to trying to pedal that back is really difficult. What I recommend they do instead is they sit down with their direct reports, their entire team, they have a conversation about what they're trying to do, what their goals are. Let people talk about the way they feel. AI is really scary for some folks, and you need to allow people to express that and talk about why they have those fears and uncertainties. And if you do that, that automatically helps. I think it generates a more honest conversation, and you as a leader or a team manager, then you can figure out a plan for how to help your people get through that. So I think for a smaller company, you can do that really quickly. You can just get everybody in the room together and have a big chat, like what do we do next?
Mm.
But for a bigger company, I'd say taking a phased approach is probably the way to go. Start with your direct reports, then roll out to teams until you get everybody in the company on board.
So, as a leader, do I have to do this myself, or can I just get Claude to sit down and do this on my behalf with those team members? Because Claude will listen to them endlessly about all of their concerns until they feel pretty good.
No, no, that's a passenger right there. What I would recommend doing is you could sit down with Claude and you could say, "Hey, help me create a change management plan." And it will do a really good job. It'll give you a lot of great ideas. It'll create a schedule for you. One of the things I would recommend is you'd say, "Okay, make me this plan," then you work on it for a bit, and then you put it back into Claude and you say, "Okay, what am I missing? What am I not thinking about?" Do my pressure test idea. And then you'll find after a couple of iterations, you'll have a really solid plan. But I would never recommend delegating your people management to an AI tool.
So, you're based in San Francisco. You're on the front line of a lot of SaaS based companies and technology businesses. You've probably seen some of this go quite poorly over the last few years. Any come to mind?
Yes, I had a client I worked with. It was a year and a half ago. It was larger size. We were running a series of AI adoption workshops for their marketing team, and we did them by department. And there was one department in particular where we probably didn't prep them enough. And it was this downward spiral of negativity as we were teaching the class. And that's really difficult because once you've got one person who's negative and then someone else jumps on board, and then it just became this, everybody piled on. And we closed out the workshop and we got through it and it was okay. We taught them the elements they needed to know, but I left it feeling very
Mm,
like, oh, that just didn't go great. And people were clearly not happy. There was a lot of distrust and fear. And we did a retrospective with the management team. And what we
mm,
realized is we hadn't prepped the management team, we hadn't given them enough of the tools to prep their people to know what was coming. And so all of the workshops that we did after that, we kind of re-geared them a little so there was more of that preparation up front, more of that change management like I
mm,
was talking about. And then the other thing we did was we created them little cheat sheets with some talking points, what to expect on the workshop. The other thing that really helped was we had the leaders communicate their expectations for the session. And
mhm,
one of the expectations was be open minded, be positive, support your team members. This is not meant to be a bashing session. And if you have a grievance, come to me directly and we'll talk about that privately instead of poisoning the rest of the team. And, I bang on a lot about the
mm.
change management piece, but
Yeah.
it's really important because if you don't do it, you end up in these scenarios where everything just goes wrong. And it's much harder to fix something once it's gone wrong.
You must have some great resources in your bag of tools and tricks. Any you want to recommend to leaders to help them learn more about this approach?
Well, I have my newsletter that I
Mm,
publish, which is all about practical ways to use AI. So if anybody's interested, AI at work, they can read that every Wednesday. Resources in particular that I use for myself, I would say I create them
mm,
based on what I do. And it used to be that you would spend all this time Googling or on LinkedIn or looking through things online to help you. Now, what you can do instead is you can go to Claude or ChatGPT. You can say, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I need to build. Can you help me with this? And the platforms are becoming so sophisticated now. You can build agents, you
mm,
can set up automations. And yes, it does start to get a little more technical, but really, there's no reason for you not to build the thing that you need. So I'd say if there's a resource you want for yourself, go out and build it.
mm. And in terms of your personal journey with AI, what platform did you start out on and what kind of platforms are you working on at the moment? Have you had a bit of a transition from what you began with to what you're working with and finding is most functional for you at the moment?
Yes, I started with ChatGPT. It it had been out for a while before I heard about it, but I think GPT-2 was the very first model I used. And at the time, I was a VP of marketing. I had a team of 12
Mm,
people working for me. And I saw this and I was like, wow, this is amazing, blew my mind. And I handed it off to everybody and they all hated it. They were like, this
mm,
is the worst thing ever. We never want to use it. And I was like, yeah, but think about the potential.
mm.
And I really forced them to start to use it as part of their forced is not the right word, encouraged. I was an encourager. I
Really in
never
that driving seat, weren't you?
I mean, yeah, I was strongly encouraged people to experiment, and
Mm,
that helped. But I because I started early with ChatGPT, it had all of its memory of me. I had my custom GPTs,
mm,
my projects, literally everything. And then people started to rave about Claude. And I was
mm,
like, "No, I don't wanna move. It's so much
mm,
work. It just takes a long time." And finally, they released a lot of different functionality, Cowork being
mm,
one of the things that's just come out, and I finally started using it about 4 weeks ago, and I have
mhm.
to say I'm really impressed. It is I mean, Chat I still have ChatGPT, I'm not giving that up, it's one of my core platforms, but I'm also probably now using Claude about the same amount because it has a different feel and it has different functionality.
Yeah, it does. I agree with that. A lot of people talk about AI saving time, but few have probably actually built some systems that genuinely do it. Have you cracked a few of those in your own work, and what did that sort of take you to do that?
I've got many stories or versions of that. I think the one that's made the biggest difference to my week is an automation I built in Claude Cowork.
Mm,
And it took me 3 days to build it, and I was working on this almost all of the day. You have to let Claude and Cowork think a lot, so I was multitasking, but you have to keep
mm,
coming back and prompting it and giving it access to different things. So it definitely it took some dedicated time. It wasn't something I could just like whip up in 30 minutes. And what I built was a newsletter workflow from start to finish. And I broke it into three different elements. I did the research phase, the outlining, and then the drafting. And I gave it access to all of my systems where I do different types of newsletter
Hmm.
activities, my research notes, my links, my meeting transcripts, because I talked to a lot of people about
Mm,
AI and it would pull in from those. I drop in a bunch of white papers into a folder, and I created a skill in Claude that it collects all those things, ingests them, and then writes me a brief.
mm,
And then I read the brief and I'm like, yeah, okay, I think this is a topic I'm interested in. It seems to be of interest to other people. We do a little bit of back and forth, and then I move into the outlining and then the drafting. And the newsletter used to take me about 13 hours
mm.
every week when I added up all the thinking, the research, the drafting. And now it probably takes me three.
Yeah. And I think one of the powers that Claude has is the model context protocol. So the MCP and being able to work far more fluidly with each of those different resources and tools that you've got. It's almost like a hub and spoke model, if you will. Did you experience some limitations with OpenAI with trying to have a similar workflow?
Yes. OpenAI doesn't have anything like Cowork at the moment. That said, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, they're releasing all this functionality so frequently. I feel like if they don't have it this week, they'll have it next week. So I am eagerly awaiting the latest release from OpenAI. All of the models have different weaknesses, if you
Mm.
will. Even Claude, I'm getting a lot of use out of it. I love my new newsletter workflow, but there are times where it just won't do things, and I'm like, You did this yesterday, or you did this an hour ago. Why won't you do it
Yeah.
now?" Or it gets stuck, or it gives me an error, or it runs me around in circles. Like I tried to build an automation through Claude with Make, which is an
Mm.
automation tool, and this was another thing that took me 2 or 3 days, and I was tearing my hair out because it kept saying, "Well, it's not working because of this." And I would say, "Well, how do I fix it?" And it would say, "Well, click this button and move this." And I was like, "That button doesn't exist." So you have to, people ask me this all the time, like, how do you get through that? I'm like, you just have to have a lot of patience.
Mm.
You have to be a good problem solver, and you have to realize that it's not like waving a magic wand. It
Mm.
is going to help you, but you have to be very adaptable and flexible. And you just have to realize that you've got to keep pushing and working at it. And if it's not going to work today, then it might work tomorrow or down the road.
So how do you operate like that, where you're sort of in this constant state of a work in progress and coming to the realization that now it's never going to be finished?
It's exhausting sometimes because it is like that. I
Mm.
create a workflow or an automation, and I think it could be better, or I could add something else. And the way I handle that is I have this kind of rule of thumb of it's good enough, or it's as good as it's going to get today. So I think of working with my AI tools as that 80%, and then I have to take it the last mile.
Mm.
And I think there's actually some benefits in that, because taking it the last mile means that I have to remove myself from the AI workflow or
Mm.
chatting with Claude and really use my brain. And it forces me to engage in a way that I wouldn't if I was letting Claude handle everything.
Yeah, so still having some judgment at the end.
Yes.
So the pace of AI is pretty relentless, as we're talking about at the moment. What are some ways that people that are feeling a bit overwhelmed with this pace can actually try and keep up and get some helm control for themselves and for their businesses?
I do this for a living. This is all I do is teach AI and think about it and read about it, and
Mhm.
I feel overwhelmed sometimes because there's such a deluge of content out there now. My advice to people is to pick an area and focus on that. There's no way you can learn everything. You can't boil the ocean.
Mm.
It's impossible. So you have to make peace with that. And the way I do it is I pick a lane. I focus on
Mhm.
AI, but I work predominantly in the marketing space. And I have a couple of my core tools, ChatGPT and Claude, and Gemini on the side. But if you are someone who wants to get into AI and doesn't know where to start, I'd say pick one tool, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Learn everything you can about that particular tool that's relevant for your job,
Mm.
and ignore everything else, because that if you start to try and do everything, you'll do nothing well.
So pick a tool and then go deep into your domain.
Yeah.
What does this look like then for someone that's sort of starting out in their career that hasn't quite found their domain yet? How do they take the power and the functionality of AI and apply it to a domain that they're still trying to find themselves?
It's true that entry level people who are just starting their career are definitely having a tougher time
Mm,
now. Companies are hiring fewer interns and entry level positions. And there's a lot of uncertainty about what roles we will
mm,
need in the future because work is changing so much. So I don't know that I would recommend a particular industry or role type, but I can recommend specific skill sets and behaviors that will
mm,
be valuable no matter where you go or what you pick. And it will all be around curiosity, flexibility, adaptability, having an open mind. And the other element is become a builder or an orchestrator. The people that will be in demand in the next 6 months, 12 months will be people who understand how to build a system.
mm.
If you are the kind of person who's plugging numbers into a spreadsheet, or you're the kind of person that sits back and waits for somebody to tell you what to do, like an order taker, you won't have a job because AI is the order taker.
Yeah.
Now, what they need, companies need someone to orchestrate that entire journey, that entire system.
So if I'm at the beginning stage and I'm learning and I'm trying to find a job and I haven't got one yet, what should I focus on for the next month, say, to level up and develop?
Learn to vibe code. Vibe code with there's tons of platforms out there like Lovable, Replit. They all do very similar things, but pick one that you like and then start vibe coding for your interest or your industry. And you'll be amazed at the kinds of things that you can start to build. And then you'll also get a feel for where you want to go and what area you want to be in. And then when you do see a job you're really interested in, vibe code them a solution and send
Yeah.
it to the hiring manager. And you can be like, look what I built you, and here's how I built this. And I guarantee you that will draw their attention more than someone who just sends them a resume.
Do you hear in the different industries that you're working with that even the recruitment process is changing where people are now being asked during interviews around what is the AI tools that they've got in their stack? What are they actually developing with it? So rather than being apprehensive about finding out how people are using it, it's more now one of becoming one of the leading questions that new people at the commencement of their career are actually being asked for entry level roles coming into organizations.
Yes, 100%. At least at the companies that I think you'd want to work at. You want to work at a company that encourages AI use. And as a prospective employee, what you should be asking the employer is,
Mm,
what tools do I have access to? What's my credit limit? Like, how much can I spend on these tools? Because what's going to happen is, if you want to do your job well and you want to start building these automations, especially in things like Claude Cowork, you're going to need a credit budget
mm,
so that the tools can run, or you're going to get stuck and it won't operate. I think companies that are blocking their employees from using some form of AI or throttling, I wouldn't go there. You want to find a company that's going to encourage your usage and be open about it and be excited that you want to experiment and build new things.
So a great follow-up question to the employer then would be, well, what's my token budget?
Exactly. Yeah.
I was looking at a clip the other day of the CEO of NVIDIA who was saying that his expectation of senior engineers is that they're spending $250,000 a year on tokens to demonstrate that they are actually making those knowledge calls.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. I mean, obviously, NVIDIA is a company on the forefront of AI, and they're building the chips to drive all this usage. So they would definitely encourage that.
I know, right? Definitely, it definitely encourages
They're
spruiking, yeah,
powering the tokens. So
more token usage. So when you
yeah.
picture organisations that are going to get this right over the next decade, but let's even bring this into a closer, shorter term view over the next cycle of, say, the next 3 years, what do you think that they're actually going to be doing differently?
They will be open and honest about the way they use and implement AI. They'll have really clear guidelines of what you can do and you cannot do. I mean, there's definitely some things you shouldn't be doing with AI. It's not a foolproof technology. And a company that's going to succeed will understand the difference.
Mm.
They will allow their people to experiment and build, but they will be very firm about, okay, here's the line and don't cross that. And you as an employee will understand how you can operate, which I think makes your life a lot easier when you understand the rules. The other thing they will do is they'll have a really strong culture where
Mm,
people, because people know and understand how to use AI, they'll feel comfortable sharing and learning from their peers. When I work with companies on AI adoption programs, the ones that do the best are the team leaders that are hosting town halls and running
mm.
lunch and learns, and where they bring me in to do something I call office hours, where people can just ask questions and try to solve their problems. And if you are if you're ignoring AI, if you're hiding it or you're restricting it too much, you're never going to grow, and I just don't see how you're going to succeed.
You sort of touched on this before as well, and you're talking about the growth that individuals need to have. What do you think are some of the professional skills that are going to become more and more essential on an individual level?
Well, you have to be literate in the tools, and you don't have to know all of them, but you need to pick at least one large language model.
Mm,
Claude is the hot ticket right now, so I'd
mm,
probably recommend at least having a base knowledge of Claude and all
mm,
of the functionality that's in it. That means knowing how to use chat, co-work, and code. You will also One of the things that we're seeing is people who have expertise or specialist knowledge in a particular area are doing better, and the reason for that is they have that training to know when AI is telling them something that's not quite right or it doesn't fit for the situation. So what I would say is, especially if you're early in your career and you don't have that depth of experience, do everything you can
mm.
to learn that thing. Once you pick it, you need to speak to people, thought leaders in your industry. You need to read every trade outlet and understand the landscape and all the players and what's important. And you need to start building that judgment muscle,
Mm.
because that's the thing that AI will never replace. And that's the thing that will make you very well sought after, is understanding the tools and how they work, but being able to apply that specialist judgment.
I agree that the AI can't replace that judgment muscle at the moment. Do you think that'll change though?
I hope it doesn't change, but you're right. I mean, it's getting better all the time. And it is, I mean, if you remember back 2 years ago, it hallucinated everything really obviously. And now it's getting much harder to catch.
Mm.
So I don't know. The other thing is people always said, "Oh, well, AI doesn't have any empathy." But when I talk to ChatGPT, I'm like, "Oh, I feel like I'm talking to a friend." And there are some days where I'm feeling a bit down or discouraged, and I'm like, "ChatGPT, give me a pep talk." And it does a really great job, and I always feel better. So I'm like, "Is that empathy?" So I don't know. It's a
We
good question.
we had a moment in our team this week where one of the team members felt like that the response from Claude was just really trying to butter them up to be agreeable to the way Claude wanted to do something with them.
Yeah, you
I
gotta
thought
watch out.
I thought that was quite clever on Claude's part, buttering buttering up the team member. So Tani, you've given us so much to act on already. Could you just surmise for us the key pieces from our discussion so far?
I think the key takeaway
Mm,
is to be a driver and not a passenger, to make sure that you spend a little bit of time each week thinking for yourself and keep making sure that you're building that muscle or maintaining that muscle, because if you do just give up everything to your large language model, your brain, you are going to lose that ability. And so I think you have to be intentional about the way you work with AI. And then if you're a team leader, make sure that you talk to your people and you include them in this whole journey, because sending out an edict about using AI isn't going to get you there. This is something that you all have to do together.
So, looking back, Tani, what would you say has been the major turning point in your entrepreneurial and professional journey? One that has sort of really shaped your business mindset going forward?
When I moved to San Francisco, I started as a solo marketer at a startup, and I was with the company all the way through the acquisition, which was an amazing experience. And when we were acquired, I kind of took a step back. I had a little bit of time and I started doing all these different things. I did a branding project, I was a fractional CMO, and I hated all of it. I was like, I don't want to do any of this. And AI had just started to become popular and usable, and people started asking me questions because I was experimenting with it and building things and talking about it online. And I had this, it wasn't like an epiphany that happened all at once, but over time I was like, there's obviously a need for this. And that's how my agency, A25, was born, was really just out of a need to, or finding a way to serve people and to help them solve their problems. And I think that was probably the biggest turning point for me.
I got one more question for you, Tani. You grew up in a tiny little town in country New South Wales on the way to the New South Wales ski fields. You're now in San Francisco. What's something that you took from growing up country in a small town that still serves you today in San Francisco?
Wow, what a great question. I think people, when you grow up in a small town, it's a really tight knit community, and you know everybody, and you know about their lives and the things they're celebrating when they're struggling. And then when you move to a bigger city like New York or San Francisco, that becomes, you don't see that as much because you've just got these masses of people. But what I've tried to do with my business and my community is to bring some of that small town mindset to it and really care about the people who are a part of my network and who they are and what's important to them and what they're trying to achieve in their life. So that's probably one thing I held on to.
Yeah, I reckon you can always tell people that grew up country just in the way that they interact with people, and it's amazing ability. Even in big cities, they still seem to be able to remember a lot of people's names and what's going on in people's lives. I think it's just part of the country DNA. You've got a great newsletter out that I think will be really helpful for people that are watching along and listening along to today's episodes. It's called AI at Work. We'll have it in the show notes so you can find it from there. Tahnee, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Whatever stage you're at using AI in your own business, Tahnee's advice is solid. Be the driver, not the passenger. Using it intentionally is what keeps you in control and will ensure that it's you that remains the beating heart of your organisation. Personally, I'm really excited about the possibilities AI can offer and have been documenting the journey of AI in our business closely in a real-time log. If you're interested in following along for free, we've included the link below alongside every other resource mentioned in this episode, plus a few extras. Thank you for joining us today on the Homegrown CEO podcast. I hope our conversation has given you some useful guidelines about adopting AI and some enthusiasm for what might lie ahead in your business. And if you're hungry for more, become a member of our exciting Homegrown CEO community to find exclusive resources to enhance your use of AI, widen your professional network, and enjoy some special bonus content from my conversation with Tahnee. Click the link in the show notes to join us at a discounted rate. Make sure you also subscribe to the show to be the first to know when our next episode drops. We look forward to you joining us then. Until the robots take my job as host, I'm Matt Colborn.